Hi students, this is Dr. Danning again. Good to see you, although not in person. We are in term 3 now, week 7, and today I will be covering comparing and ordering fractions. Okay, so either you can get your booklets ready or you can just get foolscap paper ready so that you can do some activities during the lesson. Okay, all right. If you have not gotten yourself ready, right, your stationeries and your paper, whatever, please press pause now. Otherwise, you may continue to watch this video. Lesson will start promptly. Okay, so we're going to start off with comparing fractions. So if you look at the question in front of you, now the question asks which is greater, 3 out of 4 or 3/5, right? 3/4 or 3/5. Now, if you were to draw, right, 3/4 and 3/5, right, in terms of these figures, let's take a look at how 3/4 looks like. Remember that 3/4 is 3 out of 4, so it is 3, right, out of 4 parts, right? In total, there are 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 3 out of 4, 3/4 is 3 out of 4 parts. Now, what about 3/5? Okay, 3/5 would be 3 out of 5 parts, right? 1, 2, 3, right? And then in total, there are 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you look at this figure here, right? 3/5 and 3/4, which is greater? Pay attention to the colored parts because the colored part shows the fraction, right? So for example, the yellow colors here, right? The shaded 3 parts here means 3 out of 4, right? And for the blue ones, it says 3 out of 5. So if you compare in terms of size, which is greater? 3/4 is greater and 3/5 is smaller. Now, why is that the case? Let's take another example. If let's say I have one chocolate bar, right? Can you imagine this as a chocolate bar, one whole piece? Okay, one chocolate bar. Now, if I were to cut, okay, let's say we have 2 chocolate bars, right, of the same size, chocolate bar A and chocolate bar B. So chocolate bar A, I cut it into 4 equal parts, right? And then I give one of the 4 to you. Okay. For chocolate bar B, I do the same thing, except that now I cut it into 5 different parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, okay, I'm going to give 1 part to you. All right. Now, which is a bigger piece of chocolate bar that you get? Is it the yellow one or the blue one? Yes, the yellow one, right? Which is 1/4. So what do you notice is when the numerator is the same, what is the numerator? Numerator is the number at the top of the fraction, the numerator. And then the denominator is the number at the bottom of the fraction. That's the denominator. So when you find out that the numerator is the same, right, of 2 fractions, so for example, 1 and 1 is the same, okay, then you look at the denominator. The smaller the denominator, the greater that fraction is. Make sense? Right? So let's take a look at the chocolate bar again. Because the denominator is 4, right? That means I only cut the chocolate bar into 4 parts. Whereas for 1/5, the denominator is 5. And so what it means is I have to cut the chocolate bar into 5 parts. So the greater the denominator, the more parts that I have to cut. And the more parts I have to cut, the smaller it gets. Do you get it now? All right, so 1/4 and 1/5, which is smaller? 1/5 is smaller, right? Because you're getting 1 out of 5 parts. Whereas for 1/4, you're getting 1 out of 4 parts. Okay, let's take another example. 3 out of 4 and 3 out of 5. Which is a smaller part? Which is a smaller fraction? That's right. 3/5 is smaller because you have to cut it into 5 parts and you're getting 3 out of 5 parts. Whereas 3/4 is you cut it into 4 parts and you're getting 3 out of 4 parts. So you're getting a bigger portion, right? 3/4 is therefore greater than 3/5. Okay, now let's look at comparing fractions using equivalent fractions. So just now, right, we compare fractions when the numerator is the same, okay, denominator different. Now what happens when the numerator and the denominator of both fractions are different, right? What do? Okay, when they are different, we can compare them by using equivalent fractions, as what was covered last week, right? If you remember what equivalent fractions is. So what we do is we convert the fraction that we need to compare, right, to another fraction into an equivalent fraction of the second fraction that we need to compare with. So for example, look at the question, which fraction is smaller, 2/3 or 5/6? So what we can do is convert 2/3, okay, into, right, because 5/6, the denominator is greater. We want to find the common factor, right? Or you'll learn common factor later, right? Of 3 and 6, right? And so to make them equivalent, you make 3 into the denominator 3 into 6. And how do you do that? You multiply, right? So 3 times 2 equals 6. So when you convert equivalent fractions, remember, you need to multiply. When you multiply the denominator by this number, in this case is 2, you need to do the same thing with the numerator. So it's times 2 as well. So 2 times 2 equals 4/6. Now you can compare 4/6, which is 2/3, right? And 5/6, which is greater or which is smaller. So 4/6 is smaller than 5/6. So we conclude that 2/3 is smaller than 5/6. All right. Okay. Let us move on to the next example. Okay, I will take you through the first maybe 1 or 2 questions, and subsequently, right, you will do the remaining of the guided questions. So let's take a look at this question. Compare the fractions. Which fraction is smaller, 4/7 or 4/9? Now, what do you notice about the numerator? It's 4, right? Or they are 4, and therefore they are the same. So when the numerators are the same, you then look at the denominator. Do you remember the rule? The bigger the denominator is, the smaller it is, right? So 9 is greater than 7. So therefore 9 is smaller than 7. So we say 4/9, okay, is smaller. Okay, now let's look at the next question. Which fraction is greater, 4/5 or 7/10? Now, this time around, you'll notice that the numerator and the denominators, they are different, right? So what do you have to use? Which method? That is right, equivalent fractions, right? You compare by equivalent fractions. So this is the question. Do you make 5 into 10 or do you make 10 into 5? Yes, 5 into 10, right? Because it is easier to make 5 into 10 or convert 5 into 10 than convert 10 into 5, isn't it? All right, so let's set up. So you have 4/5. You want to convert it into a fraction with a denominator of 10. How do you do it? How does 5 becomes 10? 5 times 2. So when the denominator is multiplied by 2, you get 10. You got to do the same with the numerator, right? Times 2 times 2. So 2 times 4 equals 8. So 4/5 is the same as 8/10. Now, can you tell me which is greater? 8/10 is greater. However, take note, if you put 8/10, your answer would be marked as incorrect by the teacher. Why? Because let's look at the question. The question is to compare 4/5 and 7/10, right? So if you find out that 8/10 is greater, which is actually 4/5, your answer you should write it as 4 out of 5. Do not write 8 out of 10, even though they are equivalent. Okay, go back to the question and look at what the question is asking. Okay, all right. Let's do the next few questions on your own, and after that, I will show you the answers. All right. If you need to listen to this portion again, you may play. You may actually go back a few, maybe a minute right before this. Listen to it again, and then after that, you can resume doing the practice questions. Okay, we are at page 4 now, so I'll leave it to you to do question C, D, and number 2 on your own. All right, you may press pause now and work on the questions. Once you are ready, you may press play again, right? And for me to show you the answers. Press pause now, please. Let's go through the answers. Okay, the first one we have is, which fraction is greater, 2 out of 5 or 2 out of 11? Okay, so the numerator is the same. So you compare the denominator. The smaller it is, the greater it is. So that means 2 out of 5 is greater. Okay, all right, next one. Which fraction is smaller? Okay, over here, you need to compare by converting one fraction into equivalent fraction of 3/8 first. Okay, so how do you do that? You take 1/4, right? You have to make it change 4 to a denominator of 8. So this multiplied by 2. 2 times 4 equals 8. Multiply by 2. Okay, and you get 2 out of 8. So 2 out of 8 or 3 out of 8, which is smaller? Answer is 2 out of 8 is smaller, right? So 2 out of 8 is actually 1/4. So we have to refer to the question and write 1/4 here. Next question. Write the equivalent fractions of 3/4 and 5 out of 6 by filling in the boxes. Then compare 3/4 and 5 out of 6. Which fraction is greater? So let's do this. Okay, how do you do that? How does 4 become 8? Times 2. Times 2. So that will give you 6. All right. Okay, so 6 out of 8, you still cannot compare with 5 out of 6, isn't it? Right? Because it's different. You have to make sure that they have an equivalent fraction, right? Equivalent denominator. So what do? Look at 6, right? There's no way 6 can become 8, but it can be the next multiple, right? Of 4. Sorry, to become the next multiple of 6. Okay, so what do? Let's convert it into 12 then. Denominator 12 times 2 times 2. So that's 10 out of 12. And that's for here. How does 4 becomes 12? Times 3. And then when you multiply the denominator by 3, you multiply the numerator by 3 as well. So it's 9. So now let's compare 9 out of 12 and 10 out of 12. Which is greater? 10 out of 12. So we say that 5 out of 6 is greater than 3 out of 4. Okay, all right. So again, if it is unclear to you, you may want to play this back again. And then once you're ready, we'll do some questions in the booklet. Please press pause now if you need time to go through the earlier questions. All right, let's do D now. Okay, question D. In order to do this, you need to find the fractions first. So what do? You find out the number of parts first. What is the numerator? The numerator is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's the denominator? Which is the total number of parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so it's 11. What about the second fraction? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and the denominator? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so you remember the smaller if the numerators are the same, the smaller the denominator, the greater it is. So 5 out of 11 is greater than 5 out of 12. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, turn to page 7. All right, and I would like you all to do these questions, right? These are all questions with the same, or fractions with the same numerator. Okay, so let me do the first few for you, which is smaller, right? Because numerator is the same. I look at the denominator. The smaller it is, the bigger it is, the smaller it is. So 4 out of 7 is smaller than 4 out of 5. What about over here? I'm looking for the greater one. Okay, the smaller the denominator, the greater it is. 5 out of 6 is equal to 5 out of 12. Okay, all right. Can you do C and D? Press pause now, and I'll go through the answers in a bit. Okay, the answers for C, we're looking for the smaller fraction. So that'll be 6 out of 11. It's smaller than 6 out of 7. Okay, now over here, we're looking for the greater one. So looking the smaller denominator, the greater it is. So 9 out of 10 is the same as, sorry, it's not the same, it's greater than 9 out of 11. Did you get the answers correct? Hope you do. Let's move on to the next practice. Okay, turn to page 10. Let's compare 5 out of 12 and 1 out of 6. Okay, so what we do now is to convert 1 out of 6, right, to a denominator of 12. So how do we do that? Times 2. Times 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, so 2 out of 12 and 5 out of 12. 5 out of 12 is greater. Oops, I spelled it wrongly. Apologies. Greater than. Okay, next, compare half to 3 out of 10, right? So I need to convert half into an equivalent fraction. That's 2 times 5. That will give me 10. Then it do the same thing to the numerator. Times 5. So 1/2 is 5 out of 10. Is it greater, smaller? Yes, it's greater than. I keep spelling greater wrongly today. Apologies. Right? Greater than. Okay. All right. Let's turn to the next page, page 11. Okay. And please do this on your own. I will show you the answers in a bit. Press pause now. Okay. So first of all, you convert 3/5 into an equivalent fraction. All right. So I need to make 5 into 10. So that it has the same denominator as 9 out of 10 times 2. That gives me 6 out of 10. So 9 out of 10 is actually greater. 3 out of 5 is smaller. Did you get that correct? Okay, the next one, 7 out of 12 and 1/4. So I need to convert it into a denominator of 12. 4 times 3 equals 12. 1 times 3 equals 3. So 7 out of 12, right? 3 out of 12 and 7 out of 12. 3 out of 12 is smaller than. 1/4 is smaller than. Okay. All right. Hope you have gotten the answer correct. We're going to do a few more practices. Get ready for the next step. Okay, turn to page 14. Page 14. Now for page 14, you are to compare 5 out of 6 and 7 out of 8. Right? Let's look at the equivalent fractions of 5 out of 6. Okay. What are the equivalent fractions? So 5 times 3 gives you 15. 3 times 6 times 3 gives you 18. Okay, these are the equivalent fractions. And finally, what about 24? 6 times which number gives you 24? 6 times 4, right, gives you 24. So 4 times 5 times 4, sorry, gives you 20. Okay, what about 7, 8? Multiply by 2, multiply by 2, 16. What about 8? Which number multiplied by 8 gives you 24? That's times 3. So 7 times 3 will give you 21. So if you look at 20 out of 24 and 21 out of 24, which is greater? 21 out of 24 is greater, right? So therefore we say that 5 out of 6, because it's 20 out of 24, is smaller than 7 out of 8, which is 21 out of 24. Okay? Okay, let's do one practice on your own. All right, can you do 15 on your own? Press pause now. Okay, let's see whether you're correct. So 5 times 2 times 2, that gives you 8, right? But if I want to make it into 12, right? That's possible as well. Okay, times 3 times 3, that will give me 15. All right, what about 3/4? Times 2 times 2, 8. Times 3, 3, 4, 12. Times 3, 9. 9 out of 12. It seems like the common denominator is, we don't have common denominator, but we have a common, we may be able to get a common numerator, isn't it? All right. We may be able to get a common numerator here. Yes, we can. Okay, so 3 times 4 equals 12. And then we do the same thing with the denominator. 4 times 4 equals 16. So now we have 12 out of 15 and 12 out of 16. Remember, it's the same numerator. So we look at the denominator. The smaller it is, the greater it is. So this is greater. This is smaller. All right. So therefore, 4/5 is greater than 3/4. All right. So you have to ask yourself, which method do you prefer? Do you prefer to find what is the equivalent numerator in which you make the numerator the same? Or you might want to find out, compare fractions by making the denominator the same, right? So there are two ways. All right. So it's up to you, right? There's no right or wrong answer. Depends on which way you are more comfortable with. All right, we will do the last practice for this worksheet before we move on to the next one. All right, now here, which is greater, 5 out of 9 or 5 out of 7? Okay, so same numerator, we look at the denominator. The greater it is, The bigger the denominator, the smaller it is. The smaller the denominator, the greater it is. So 5 out of 7 is greater than 5 out of 9. All right, I'm going to teach you one more method, and this is called the X-Men method. Okay, I'll explain to you why it's an X-Men method in a while. So let's look using the same question, 5 out of 9 and 5 out of 7. Okay, which is greater, right? So obviously we know the answer now, but I'm going to show you another method, right? Why do I call it X-Men method? I'm going to draw an X to chain up the number together. So 5 and 7, right, is 1. And then 5 and 9 together, another 1, right? So can you see an X here? We got quite the X-Men method. Okay, so now let's do. What is 5 times 7? 35. What is 5 times 9? 45. All right? Multiply, right? 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times 9 is 45. Which is greater, 45 or 35? Obviously, it is 45, right? So can you see that 5 out of 7 is greater? 5 out of 9 is smaller. Okay, now can we use the X-Men method for this question? 5 out of 12 and 3/4, which is greater, which is smaller? So X-Men method. Four times 5 equals 20. 3 times 12 equals 36. Wow, right? So 36 is greater than 20. So therefore, 20 is smaller. Okay? So 5 out of 12 is smaller. 5 out of 12 is smaller than 3 out of 4. Okay? Do you get the X-Men method? Okay, so another method for you. It is up to you to decide which is better for you, right? Or which one your teacher is asking you to do. Okay, let's get ready for the next booklet, right? I'm going to pause for a while we get ready the next booklet. Okay, we are moving on to ordering fractions. Now, earlier on, we have already learned how to compare fractions. Once you're able to compare fractions, right, which is greater, which is smaller, you would be able to order them, right? So let's take a look at this question. Arrange 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, and 7 out of 12 in order. Begin with the greatest. What does begin with the greatest mean? Which means your first fraction will be the greatest, followed by the middle one, followed by the smaller one, right? This is begin with the greatest. So let's take a look at the fractions. What is 2/3? Okay, if you look compare by size, right? This is 2 out of 3 parts. This is 3 out of 4 parts. And this is 7 out of 12 parts. Right? Now, if you just look at it visually, which is the greatest? Visually, which is greatest? Which covered the most area? Which is the most area that is colored? This one, right? And what would be the middle one? This one, right? Visually, right? And what would be the smaller one? This one. Now, if you don't have the visuals to help you, okay, then you will need to convert them into equivalent fractions, as what we learned in the previous lesson. So 2/3, 3/4, 7/12. Right, let's look at the biggest one, right? Biggest denominator is 12. So we'll convert everything, all denominators into 12. 2/3, if you convert into denominator of 12, you get 8 out of 12. 3/4, if you convert into denominator of 12, you get 9 out of 12. So now let's compare 8 out of 12, 9 out of 12, 7 out of 12. Which is the greatest? Greatest is 9 out of 12, followed by the middle one, 8 out of 12. And the smallest one is 7 out of 12. Now, if you recall what I mentioned earlier, because the question is to arrange 2/3, 3/4, 7 out of 12. Okay, please do not arrange based on out of 12, 9 out of 12, and 7 out of 12, right? You got to go back to the original fractions. So let's see. The greatest is 9 out of 12, right? So 9 out of 12 is 3/4. So 3/4 is the first one. And the middle one is 8 out of 12, which is 2/3. So you write 3/4, 2/3, and the smallest is 7 out of 12. Okay, so that's how you arrange your answer. All right, if you need to pause or listen to what I've said a few minutes ago, right? Want to recap, please do so now. If not, we'll move on to the next page. Okay, now we arrange 3 out of 5, 1/3, and 3/7 in order. Begin with the smallest. Okay, now what can we do here? First of all, we know that 3 out of 5 and 3 out of 7, they have the same numerator. All right, so what we can do is we can compare these two fractions first. Do you remember how to compare them? Right, this is between the smallest, so we're looking for the smaller one. Which is smaller, 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 7? That's right, 3 out of 7 is smaller, right? Smaller than 3 out of 5. Okay, next we compare 1/3 with 3/5 and 3/7, right? And we can write 1/3 as an equivalent fraction with numerator of 3 as well, right? So 1/3 convert into numerator of 3. How do we get it? Right, remember 1 times 3 equals 3. 3 times 3 equals 9. Right, so 1/3 is the same as 3 out of 9. Right, so let's look at the denominator of, okay, so because the denominator of 3 out of 9 is greater than the denominator of 3 out of 5 and 3 out of 7, right? 9 is the greatest denominator among the 3 fractions. So we say that 3 out of 9 is the smallest. Okay, and so the way to arrange this would be, right, 1/3, which is 3 out of 9, the smallest, followed by 3 out of 7, followed by 3 out of 5, which is greatest. Got it? Okay, if not, you can, if you still don't get it, right, you might want to listen back again, right? If not, we will move on to the next question. Okay, let's do the guided practice. Arrange half, 5 out of 6, and 3/8 in order. Begin with the smallest. Okay, so let's try to compare half and 5/6 first, which is smaller. So half is the same as 3 out of 6, correct? Okay, that's how I get 3 out of 6. So which is smaller, half or 5 out of 6? Half is smaller. All right, next we compare half, right? We want to compare it with 3 out of 8. So let's change the denominator, right? 2 to 8 is times 4. And the numerator is 4 out of 8. So which is smaller, 4 out of 8 or 3 out of 8? 3 out of 8. Okay, so it seems that 3 out of 8 is the smallest. So let's arrange. Answer is 3 out of 8, followed by half. And the greatest is 5 out of 6. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Okay, can I get you to do 2A, 2B, and 2C on your own, right? Which is one whole question. Arrange 2 out of 3, 7 out of 9, and 5 out of 9 in order between the greatest. Fill in the boxes and blanks below to help you. Okay, please pause now. Okay, let's see whether you've gotten the answer correct, right? So let's start with 2/3. 2/3 we compare with 7 out of 9 first, right? The question is bigger in the greater, so we want to find out which one is greater. So 2 out of 3 is the same as 6 out of 9. Correct? Times 3 times 3. So 6 out of 9 or 7 out of 9, which is greater? 7 out of 9 is greater. So we know 7 out of 9 is compared to 2/3 is greater. Next, we compare 2/3 with 5 out of 12, right? Which means we need to convert 2/3 with the denominator to the denominator of 12, right? 3 to the denominator of 12. So 3 times 4 times 4. 8 out of 12. 2/3 is the same as 8 out of 12. So which is greater, 8 out of 12 or 5 out of 12? 8 out of 12, right? Which is 2/3. So can you arrange the fraction in order now? We know that 7 out of 9 is greater than 2/3. So obviously 7 out of 9 is the greatest, followed by 2/3, followed by 5 out of 12. Easy? Okay, let's do a few more practice before we call it a day. Okay, let's turn to page 13, right? 13. Arrange 5 out of 8, 3/4 and half in order. Begin with the smallest. Right? Do you remember how to do this? All right, you compare one fraction, 2 fractions at a time. Right? Hint, try comparing 5 out of 8 or 3 and 3/4 first. See which is smallest. Okay, press pause now. I'll leave you to try and solve this, and after you're done, you may continue playing to see my answers and see whether they're correct. Okay, so early on, I've given you the hint. Let's compare 5 out of 8 and 3/4, which is smaller. Okay, so let's do 3. Okay, so 5 out of 8. So I need to convert 3/4, right, into equivalent fraction, right, with 5 out of 8. So that means that denominator of 4 needs to become 8 times 2 times 2. What do I get? 6 out of 8. So which is smaller? 5 out of 8 or 3/4? Okay, 5 out of 8. Conclusion is 5 out of 8 is smaller than 3/4. Okay, all right, next. What do we compare? Do we compare 3/4 with half? Or do we compare it with 5/8 with half? Think about it. Okay, all right, okay, so we can compare 3/4 and half, right? So now how to compare 3/4 and half? So for half, we need to change it into denominator of 2, we need to change to 4. So times 2 times 2. All right, so 3/4 and half, which is smaller? Half is smaller than 3/4. All right, so it seems like 3/4 is the biggest. What do we do now? We have to decide which is smaller. Half is smaller or 5 out of 8 is smaller. All right, so we know that 3/4 is the biggest. It's just that we have to decide 5 out of 8 or 1 out of 2. So let's try and compare half and 5 out of 8 using equivalent fractions, right? 8 times 4 times 4. We get 4. So 4 out of 8 and 5 out of 8, which is smaller? That's right. 4 out of 8 is smaller. So what's the conclusion? So half is the smallest, followed by 5 out of 8, right? Followed by 3/4. Okay, did you get it? Okay, we will do the last question of the day. Now, this question is a bit different, right? Using half as a benchmark to compare fractions. So arrange 4 out of 5, 5 out of 12, and 7 out of 10 in order, beginning the smallest. Now, let's look at the number, right? Which number is, or rather, which fraction is smaller than half? So if I look at it, 4 out of 5, no, greater. 5 out of 12, yeah, 5 out of 12 is smaller than half, right? Because half is actually 6 out of 12. All right, and then 7 out of 10 is greater than half. So we know that 5 out of 12 is the smallest. Now let's compare 4/5 and 7/10. There are a few ways to do it. All right, you can use the X-Men method, or you can use the equivalent fraction method. So if you use equivalent fraction method, 4 out of 5 is the same as, I'm not going to show you working because I think you're very familiar with the working by now, right? So it is the same as 8 out of 10. So 7 out of 10 is smaller than 4 out of 5. So this should be the answer. What about the X-Men method? Four times 10, 40. 5 times 10, 35, right? So 7 out of, there you go, 7 out of 10 is smaller. Okay, all right. So we are done with the lesson. Once you're ready, please go to the online platform to do your assigned homework. After the homework is marked, I will arrange to see you via Zoom, right, for consultation to go through the corrections. Okay, thank you, students. Have a nice day. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.